This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the medical advice of physicians. The listener should regularly consult a physician in matters relating to their health, and particularly with respect to any symptoms that may require diagnosis or medical attention. Thank you and enjoy listening. Welcome to episode 2 with Dean Kilby, founder and director of Simpler Health. If you haven't listened to episode 1 yet, please do. The link is in the show notes. But in episode 1, we talked about stem cells, regenerative health, the importance of getting out of your head and just simply being in the moment. And this is where we pick up this episode. So please tune in, and I hope you love listening to what Dean has to say as much as I do.
Wherever you experience being constrained, wherever there's a lack of power, wherever you're not producing the results that you want to produce in life, then you can take the perspective of maybe who I've become in life isn't real. Maybe I made that up. Let me examine that. And it's hard to do because you're in the middle of it all. So it's much easier when you talk it out, and that's where life happens. And real thinking happens out here. You might know that you write things down. I'm great in front of a whiteboard. All of a sudden, you do a brain dump, or you're in communication, you nut things out with people. That's where real thinking happens. It's very difficult to think at a high level by yourself. That's why to think at a high level, it requires some environmental stimuli, like you go for a walk in nature, for example. Or long periods of silence. It takes something like that to allow for high levels of thinking when you're by yourself. Way easier when you can just write it down on a whiteboard or talk to someone. Other than that, there's just thoughts, and those thoughts are weird, and often just if you put your thoughts on loudspeaker throughout the day, you'd be locked up.
In the writing world, we call it our internal editor. So when we sit down to write as authors, we sit down and then suddenly our internal author goes, or our internal editor says, "What is that? What have you just written? Oh my gosh, can you even construct a sentence? What is wrong? He did not say that. She did not do that. No, that's wrong. That's wrong." So it's kind of like, it's about saying to that internal editor, it's okay. I know you're trying to protect me, and I thank you for it, but I don't need you right now because I just need this creative flow. And the only way that's going to happen is if you zip it.
Yes. Yeah. Just thanks for sharing.
Thanks for sharing, but I don't need you right now. Yeah. I don't need your protection. There's no big scary group of people out there, or bears or lions or the rest.
That's so rare that we have the presence to do that. When you look at throughout the day, you're just like stimulus response. Throughout the day, and it's all survival. If I just got to get through the morning school run, and then I've got to survive until lunchtime, and then you have a little break, and then it's still a world of survival. It's like, what do I eat for lunch? And you're dissatisfied with your body and your health, and it's like you're trying to survive lunch, and then in interactions in the workplace, for example, and then you got to survive the afternoon because you had a sandwich, and each slice of bread is the equivalent of 4 to 5 teaspoons of sugar. So now your blood sugar shot up, and then your pancreas went boom and released a heap of insulin, and it brought it down, but it brought it down too low.
And now you want to have a sleep.
Now you're tired and you're irritated and you're grumpy, and you're just like, get out of my way. Someone find me a Tim Tam, because and this is the time of day when you're trying to be most productive to get everything done, because you weren't as productive as you thought you were going to be because your schedule got interrupted early on in the piece. And now you're trying to get out of the office by a certain time, and then you're pissed off because it's going to be delayed, and then you get home late, and now you're angry at yourself because now your kids are on your back, and and it's all just survival. So to just notice it all and go, wow, and to practice letting it be. That's one of the most challenging things for human beings, because as human beings, we always have to tinker with things. We can't just let it be. We can't let ourselves be. We can't let others be. We can't even if something's perfectly designed and it's designed to produce a specific outcome, and it's an outcome that you really, really want, and you've had no power in being able to produce those outcomes, and then someone gives you a protocol, for example, that is perfectly designed and it's demonstrated time and time again to be able to produce that result, left to your own devices, people just won't follow the protocol the way it's designed. They'll tinker with it. And they'll say, oh, but I thought you could modify it, blah, blah. It's like, listen, don't trust your thoughts and feelings. They're the thoughts and feelings that got you into this unworkable state in the first place, right? So that's why I have a coach and et cetera, right? All champions have a coach, because a coach can see what you can't see. And so you need that kind of extra pair of eyes to be able to support and guide you through, especially when your internal state is going to take you off track or down a different path. So to be able to notice the voice in your head for what it is. And I had this conversation with my son when he was about 7. Man, he was awesome back then. He's 16 now. So yeah.
Wow.
Anyway.
Yeah.
No, he's great. He's just like a genius kid. But back when he was 7, we were having a conversation about the voice in your head. And he said, what do you mean? I said, just be quiet for a moment and just listen to what that voice is saying. And he did. And he shut up for a bit and he started laughing. And I said, what's so funny? He said, oh, Daddy, that voice doesn't say very nice things. And I said, that's right. That's right, sweetie. That's what happens. And that's where people get trapped, because they start relating to that voice in their head is not only true and real, they relate to that voice in their head as them. And then we have to respond to it and tinker with it. And the internal dialogue, the internal state might say things like, I am hungry. And that's a mental state. So it's, I am fill in the blank. And the moment you declare, and the creative phenomena in language is declaration. Like you declare something to be so. You don't describe it. It's not the description of independence. It's the declaration of independence, for example, right? Or there's a moment before, someone who's entrusted with the power to declare it says, I now declare you husband and wife. The moment before that, you weren't. So it's a very real phenomenon, but it's a phenomenon that exists only in language. So people declare themselves hungry, and then in that very next moment, who they are for themselves and in the universe is a hungry person. What does a hungry person have to do? They have to eat. Right? So, yeah, but if you can get that it's a mental state, it's not true and real, that experience is fleeting. There's nothing wrong with being hungry. I mean, we're all raised into a world where it's wrong and bad to be hungry. If you're hungry, you shouldn't be. You need to eat. And we get ourselves into trouble.
Yes, we are.
Like if you have the slightest bit of discomfort or a slightest bit of dissatisfaction, you're always acting on it. You can't just let it be for a moment. And so people make impulse decisions, whether it be to eat the foods that they know that they're not supposed to eat, that they know won't serve them later intellectually, but in the moment they can't help themselves. Why? Because who they've declared themselves to be is a hungry person or a dissatisfied person. You make impulse decisions on your face and things get augmented, or you make rash decisions and quit your job, or whatever it is. Opt out of a relation, start a relationship. Like it's, people make these off the cuff decisions based on an internal state, and they're trigger happy. And then you suffer the consequences. And it's not necessarily the decision you made. It's the solution problem mass that you become more and more at the effect of. It's like the boulder that you're holding on to, pushing you against the wall, just seemingly keeps getting bigger and bigger. You wake up one morning, it's like resigned and cynical. It's like, how the heck did my life end up like this? This isn't what I thought I was signing up for. When I was younger, everyone said the world is your oyster. You can do anything you want. And it's like, no, that's not true. They lied to me.
So how do you, because this is, I mean, honestly, you and I we could chew the fat over this, and oh my gosh, we haven't even started on quantum physics, but that's another. But like, this kind of stuff is absolutely fascinating, but there's got to be some actual palatable doable verb things that people can do? Like what are the things that people can do? Like you've just said then, I love the example, I am hungry. And of course, as soon as you said I am hungry, my stomach started rumbling. I too am hungry. There we go. I've declared it. The language is out. I'm hungry.
Yes.
And my stomach will continue to rumble until I get something in my mouth.
Well,
Anyway.
I am hungry is an interpretation, right? It's an interpretation of what? Of some body sensation that you experienced. You said your tummy started rumbling. Well, it could just be gas.
Could be.
Don't know.
True.
I mean, I have people saying I had to eat because my blood sugar levels were low. I'm like, you don't
How do you know?
You don't measure it. Right? So there's a being able to distinguish the condition in which we live as human beings. So to just stop for a moment and start to get machinery as machinery. First of all, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, everyone's living inside of a story that there's something wrong with them that needs to be fixed and changed. Because that's all you can ever do from a context or a perspective or viewpoint of something being wrong. All you can do with something that's wrong is fix or change it. So we're perpetually stuck in this trap of trying to fix and change ourselves, fix or change them, or fix and change the situation. There's no peace of mind there. Right? So firstly, you just got to kind of stop and just be with where you're at. And there's nothing wrong with where you're at. I mean, you've made it this far. If your central nervous system evolved purely just to survive the next moment, you've done well. You're here. Doesn't matter how your life has been up until this point. You've got to learn to love the journey that it's been, and everything here, that's every decision you've made, every pathway, every way of being, it's all been to survive, and it's served its purpose, and it's done it well, right? Irrespective of how you may judge yourself and your lot in life. Now, that next moment, you now have an opportunity to create. And you can only ever fall in love with your own creation. It's like when you're first dating someone, you know, you don't know them from a bar of soap, but the experience of falling in love, you make up who they are. They say these stupid jokes and they're wonderful to you. I mean, you're up till 3 a.m. in the morning talking on the phone. You just can't get enough of each other. You know, you're driving in traffic and the cars are cutting you off and you don't care. You're like, go ahead. I'm in love. You know, it's like nothing bothers you. You know, and then you get married and you wake up 10 years later and you roll over and you see the person next to you and you're like, still here.
You again.
Right? You again. Why? Because all of a sudden there's a predictability to it. You know, if you say this, they're going to respond in that way. If you push this button, they're going to do this, or, you know, and there's a predictability, and you know who they are, you know who they're not. They can only ever show up as that which you know them. So now there's a trap for you, and there's a trap for them as well, right? Because there's no freedom to be any way, because they can only ever show up as that which you know them. So the ability to kind of start letting go of whatever you're being right about. And there's a righteousness, like we hold on to, that they used to trap monkeys like this. They'd get in the jungles of Africa, they'd get a perspex box, they'd put a little hole in it, they'd put some fruit on the ground, put the perspex box on top of it, and the monkey would come down from the trees and put its hand in the hole and grab the banana, and it couldn't pull its hand out because the banana was too big. And then the poachers would come and put a bag over the monkey and dong it on its head and, you know, trap the monkey, right? All the monkey had to do was let go of the banana and it would be free. It could run away, but it won't let go of the banana. So there are many bananas that we as human beings hold on to. It's like, we have to be right about it. It's, you know, we just can't let go. Even when we're arguing with someone, we know it's not serving what we're ultimately committed to in this relationship. We know that there's going to be a massive mess to clean up in the aftermath, which is going to be uncomfortable, and it could be absolutely detrimental to the relationship. Yet Even if we've forgotten what the heck that we're arguing about, we keep going because we have to win the bloody argument. We just won't let go of the banana. And so there's a number of things that people are being right about their own lot in life, their own view of themselves, what they see in the mirror. For example, when we coach people, part of the way the brain rewires and the way that you view yourself, at least your own image of yourself, I get clients to take photos. These don't get shared. It's just more the act of them actually generating the courage to take the photos and send it to me or one of my coaches every 4 weeks. And most importantly, what that does is it really starts to rewire the brain in how you relate to your own image in the mirror. Otherwise, what happens is someone loses 50, 60 kilograms, they get to their ideal body weight, and then they look in the mirror and they reject themselves because that fat was put there to protect themselves from some threat that life was, some threat that occurred to them. And, you know, every layer of fat comes with a story, and every kilogram that they lose, they have to let go of that story. And if that work, that ontological work, that phenomenological work isn't done along the way, they get to where they think they want to be, and then they reject it. And because they experience being vulnerable versus, you know, if we do the real work in the coaching relationship, when they get to that ideal body weight, they're empowered, freed up from the constraint of everything that was unworkable, that they justified, they explained their way out of being responsible for. And now they're freed up from that. And it's not about now I've got the perfect body and I can love myself. No, our job as coaches is to work with people to fall in love with themselves first. I mean, you've got to love yourself first. What that takes is, it's not even being satisfied with where you're at. That's distinct from loving oneself. Loving oneself, to love someone, even yourself, is the highest level of acceptance. To love you or others just as you are and just as you're not, with the freedom to be any way. So when someone loves themselves enough, then handling their health, handling whatever they need to handle to fulfill on the life that they really want, that then becomes an expression of that love. And that's the most powerful context that, you know, one can create for themselves. And it takes choosing where you're at. And people don't want to choose where they're at because they think that if I choose where I'm at, I'm going to be stuck with it. No, you've been resisting where you're at. That's what's caused the stuckness. So it's like if you're pushing against a wall and you're constantly resisting the wall, you have to resist it. That wall could represent, I don't know, a past life. It could represent, and when I say a past life, I don't necessarily mean a past life. I mean like something in your past.
Yeah.
It could relate to a parent. Like, I do not want to be like my mother. And the more you resist that, and the more you have to resist it, the more you end up becoming like your mother. I mean, you see it in others. It's easy to see it in others. They're like, oh my God, I so don't want to be like my mother. And you're looking at it and going, but you're exactly like your mother. Like, right? It's hard to see that about ourselves. So if you can just let that wall be just as it is and just as it's not, stop making it wrong. Let go of your righteous point of view about your judgments of that wall. Then that wall lets you be. And guess what? You're free to create beyond that wall. If you're resisting that wall, you can't leave it. You have to keep resisting it.
Wow.
So you can't create anything other than what you've already got right now.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that degree of acceptance, choice, love of where you're at, that's got to be where people start. Otherwise, you get trapped in the perpetual world of change, and it's just more stimulus response and impulse, and you'll change something, and the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, because you end up just in a circle. You go round and round, quite literally in a circle. Every angle you change, if you keep changing it, you'll just create a full circle in the end.
Exactly. And if, like, how do you know something's changed? And the forms of change are more. So I want more volume, less than, I want less wrinkles, right? Different, like a different nose, or so more, less, different, or better, whatever that means. And then people are constantly living in hope, and there's no power in hope that things are going to get better. Well, this is the harsh reality. There is no hope, and it's never going to get any better.
It's interesting because they're looking for change, like you've just described, more, less, different, or better, or different, was it?
They're the forms of change. So how do you know something's more, less, better, different? You have to keep bringing the past into the present future to reference the change. So the more we are addicted to change, and that's just kind of the universe is constantly changing. You don't even have to do anything and things, changing. So you're constantly bringing the past into the present future and keeping the past in existence. So you're never free from the past. You can never let the past be where it ought to be, in the past.
Well, every time you make that change, so you, like you said, more, less, better, or different, the more you try and implement change, the more you're saying that what wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough. I'm still seeking better. I'm seeking perfection. I'm seeking something that's going to, when I do that, when I do more of, less of, whatever, that it's going to make me happy. Because essentially that's all it boils down to, isn't it? Is people going, oh, I did this. So I took those, I've started this diet, or I do this exercise because I read this thing, and And a lot of people are looking for that quick fix in terms of what's going to make them healthier, what's going to make them fitter, what food they need to eat. And you see it. It's suddenly everything's coconut oil things, or suddenly everything's kale things, because they've read an article which said that, a particular type of vitamin was found in kale, and next thing you know, everything's kale this and kale that kind of thing. It's kind of like, it's about finding a balance in life that allows you to just, like you said, to just be.
Yeah. And I'm not saying don't do any of those.
No, but
the context and the ability to kind of just get the folly of it all. At some point, we all end up one of two situations: dirt in our face or a fire up our ass. That's kind of it, right? And so you kind of want to get the reality of it, and also the folly of it. Nothing's personal to you as a human being. There's a condition of humanity, and when I say condition, it's like there's a saying: bird is to air, fish is to water, being unto itself. So a fish doesn't know it's swimming in water. It's just kind of, it doesn't even know it's being a fish. It's just being, right? But if you were that fish in the water and we pulled you out of the water, all of a sudden you'd look back and it'd be, wow, water. I get the resistance. I get why things were so hard, but hang on a minute, out here, I can't breathe. So I've got to be in there, but now responsible for the condition of humanity. And that condition alters over time based on agreement reality. There's that, the more you say it to yourself, you're also listening to yourself. So the more you say I'm useless or I can't, you're hearing that as well, even if it is only in the privacy of your own head. And you create what's called an agreement reality. And there's the physicalness to that as well. You get these reinforced neuronal pathways. The action potential threshold on them lowers, so they more easily trigger, and it takes only a little bit of perception and it triggers these past derived neuronal brain patterns. And then, it's like when you react to something and your reaction's completely disproportionate to what's actually happening. And then you have to come back later and apologize. And it's like, had nothing to do with you. I was reacting to something from my past and you just reminded me of an ex or something like that, right? And so that's how much our brain controls us, right? It is actually possible to train your brain to work for you, but that's a different conversation. There's the ability to start to distinguish and articulate the condition of this default mood of humanity, which is one of resignation and cynicism. Now, people don't want to relate to themselves as resigned and cynical. Why? Because it doesn't look good to be like that. People want to, pretend like they're upbeat and positive, but the more you try and be positive, fundamentally, that just leaves people more and more dissatisfied and disempowered. Why? Because there's like this layer, this blanket of positivity over the top of an ocean of negativity. Right? But if you can kind of get that, that there's this game of life, and currently there's a condition, and it's given by this agreement reality, and that constitutes everything from why is a $2 coin worth less than a $50 note? Is it really? I mean, we all just agree that that's so, and it just occurs to us as true and real. And there's agreement reality at the level of society. And that agreement reality includes fashion and beauty, and that's malleable and it shifts over time. And, one point, something was beautiful, and another point in time, something else is beautiful. And then there's cross-cultural differences in what's beautiful. And it's a subjective phenomenon, but it's not just subjective to the individual, because you don't live in a vacuum. You live in a society, in a conditioned humanity. So you kind of have to develop an awareness and pull yourself out and kind of get a perspective of it all from Mars or something, It sounds weird.
Almost like a bird's eye view. You have to sit above yourself and hover and go, what's actually going on here? Because I think, and it's fascinating what you do in terms of your coaching. And I know a lot of it, like, because you talk about health related things, and you do talk about nutrition, and you do talk about exercise, and the absolute 100% importance of those things in people's lives to not only improve the function of our physical being, but also in terms of our mental health as well. Those things are incredibly important for living, not necessarily living to an older age, but living better for longer, kind of thing, like living healthier, living happy, living, you know what I mean? It's kind of, so I mean, obviously there are certain things like carbohydrates I'm thinking of that get a really bad rap in terms of the things. So in terms of your coaching that you do with Simpler Health, is that like, do you go through things like exercise, and do you go through like diet and nutrition, and are there specific things that people should be following for their own health?
Yes, we tell people what to eat, what not to eat.
Yep.
And write down what you eat, and don't miss a coaching session. Right? They're the 4 basics. So fundamentally, people come to us because they're resigned and cynical. They've tried everything, and this is their last stitched effort. And if this doesn't work, then, screw it. Everyone's just going to have to love me the way that I am. But you don't yet. So it's difficult for everyone else too, right? So we take people through a process where it stops being so personal. I mean, 2/3 of the adult population in Australia are at least overweight. Half of that cohort is obese, which means a BMI over 30. And if you've got a BMI over 35, I mean, your total life expectancy is cut short by about 15 years on average. Now, that says nothing about the quality of life.
Quality, yeah.
If you're inflamed and you have crappy conversations about yourself, and you've got no energy, and there's brain fog, and everyone you speak to has got some tactical approach that could make a difference, but none of it really has made a difference, and then you come to us, then you do what we say, we'll get your body sorted. But when we do, we have to ensure that along the way you have transformed, that you've grown up, that there's an experience of growing up, that all these juvenile ways of being and acting are distinguished and brought into the foreground, where you can be responsible for those ways of being and acting. And now there's a sufficient kind of adult, powerful, integrous, responsible human being that can sustain that result for the rest of their life. And you don't need us anymore, right? So in terms of what you got to eat and what not to eat, clearly you got to stop eating the foods where there's a sugar-fat combination. So that sugar-fat combination is a nutrient combination that just doesn't typically happen in nature. In nature, you get protein and fat together, or you get protein and carbs together, like in legumes and so forth. But rarely, if ever, do you get sugar and fat together, carbs and fat together. We put them together in the form of biscuits,
Donuts,
cheese on toast, like all the stuff that we get addicted to. And why? Well, there is one place in particular that they do come together in nature, and that's milk, right? So we breastfeed, and that's a very safe, nurturing, nourishing space to be on your mother's breast, feeding on that nutrient combination. And it's addictive. It has an addictive quality, and you want an infant to be addicted to feeding. Why? Because it's the most rapid growth period of their life. And it's not just the nutrients for growth, it's also for immunoprotection and all of that. Now, there's a time where we wean off the breast, and we're the only mammal that continues to consume milk post-weaning. They keep feeding us dairy, now from a different species, right? And our brain never matures. So that nutrient combination keeps us stuck in a very immature state. So now we're adults, supposedly, and we're threatened, and life is occurring as dangerous and stressful, and we're overwhelmed. And instead of relating to ourselves as big enough to deal with whatever's happening in the current set of circumstances, at least we want to find some area of retreat that allows us to, for a short period of time, think that everything's going to be okay. Hoodwink ourselves. And we turn to that nutrient combination because it reminds our brain of the most nourishing, nurturing, safest place in the universe. And so we'll turn to those foods, whether it be chocolate and ice cream, all the way through to, savory versions like deep fried potato. All right. Now, and because we're adults and we need a drink, throw alcohol in the mix, now we're screwed. Right? And it's very difficult to kind of rewire the brain out of that. Now, when I put people on a specific protocol, there are 4 areas that start to adapt to a new environmental challenge that we create for them. And that adaptation is part of the reprogramming properties that need to take place. So metabolically, obviously, so there's hormonal rebalancing that happens. There's epigenetic changes as well, and substrate partitioning and what fuel our body utilizes. Hello, Dean speaking. Oh, hello, you got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, got me? Okay,
Yep.
cool. Yeah, so there's 4 areas of adaptation. There's metabolic changes that happen, but there's also neurological rewiring. The way in which the situation occurs, so the way in which you occur for yourself, the way in which your health occurs, the way in which your future occurs for you, the way in which food occurs, and the way in which the environment in which you're handling the situation occurs for you. All of that starts to shift and your brain rewires. We have clients that have been addicted to pizza and flavored milk their whole life, and then they work with us, and then they look at those foodstuffs and there's no urge, like there's nothing about it. It's not even like they have to manage themselves around it. It's just there. And then your gut microbiome has to reconstitute. So there's a lot of interplay between the gut and not just the biome, but also the molecules that the bacteria and other microbes secrete that influences how the nervous system in the gut feeds back to the brain, all this sort of stuff. You have basically parasites inside of you that are controlling your brain. And we see this with fish. There are parasites in fish. They infect the fish. It overtakes the fish nervous system, and it causes the fish to swim closer to the surface of the water, which makes them easier prey for birds to come and get that fish to then fly to a distant body of water, eat the fish, become infected, poo in that distant body of water, which then infects other fish in that body of water. And that's how this parasite gets around. And we have microbes that have a similar effect on how our brain sees and acts on certain types of food, etc. And even alcohol. And, there was a study just recently, a few years ago, where they took alcoholics and they did what's called a fecal microbiota transplant. So basically they wipe out your flora with very potent high-dose antibiotics, and then they transplant the bugs from a healthy person's poo, basically. There's a famous professor here in Sydney who's helped pioneer that whole procedure, and he calls them crapsules. So crap in a capsule, right? And anyway, you transplant them in, repopulate the colon, and interestingly enough, these alcoholics all of a sudden lost their urge to consume alcohol. And it had addiction specialists just kind of scratching their head going, what the heck have we been working on? We've been working on the wrong end.
Yeah, we've been working on this, thinking about it.
You got to do both.
Yeah.
But, biology is never this or that. It's always something in between. But, it does lend itself to a greater understanding of the importance of our gut microbiome in the area of addiction and food addiction, if that is such a phenomenon, right? And then also immunologically as well. If you're eating carbohydrates and overstimulating the secretion of insulin, you've got to have an understanding that insulin is pro-inflammatory. And that's why I like presenting at Cosmeticon, for example, and having the opportunity to interact with aesthetic medicine experts, because you guys get to see the initial impact of insulin resistance very, very early on. It shows up in the skin in the form of autoimmune diseases like rosacea, eczema, and psoriasis, skin tags, and discoloration. So if you just, and if you could see that someone's got a BMI over 25, it's usually pretty obvious, especially if they've got poor skin health, they've got poor skin integrity, it's just not clear, etc. They're not eating well. So then they're coming in to see you to get kind of a superficial fix, when fundamentally what they need to do is stop eating sugar, stop eating so much, drink more water, these basics, right? That could really make a big difference to their, skin appearance, as well as their energy and just their experience of themselves. And more importantly, their ability to be out here in the world, be present to where they're at, versus constantly dealing with their internal dialogue, which always, like my son said, saying not so nice things. So you're always trying to survive this voice in your head that's not even real, that you have no control over, versus being out here. It's one of the reasons why I do what I do, out here making a difference to people, coaching people, causing outcomes that really causes dramatic shifts in the quality of people's lives. Because if I'm not doing that, I'm just going to be left dealing with my own stuff.
So Dean, in your coaching, do you see people who aren't looking to lose weight, or they are, but just not a huge amount? Do you look for those kinds of people as well? Is it for everybody, as in not everybody, but every single body out there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so our target market are big people with big lives. And it doesn't necessarily mean big people like in physicality. It's just, as a human being, there's something that you want to contribute. There's something that you want to get up to. There's something you want to fulfill on. And there's the experience of being constrained and limited by your own physical ailments, your own experience of your physicalness. It might just be you need a metabolic reset, a rapid reset. There are people with sleep issues. There are people with bloating, gastrointestinal disorders. I've had, I don't advertise this for good reason, but there are many couples that come to me who have tried desperately to fall pregnant, many thousands of dollars wasted on IVF and frozen embryos, etc. They come and see us. We put them on a specific diet, and I coach them in a particular way. Mostly the coaching is like, do what we say and have sex every day. And, and they're like, every day, really? And it's like, yeah, because then you've got to deal with everything that shows up that's in between you and your partner. And that's everything from, I'm tired, I can't be bothered, all the way through to, I hate your guts right now, don't freaking touch me, right? And all that stuff has to get worked out, right? And then what gets created in the empowered relationship is a clearing of aliveness in which a new life can arise. There's many simpler health, I call them simpler health babies that are out there now.
That's so lovely.
It's very satisfying. I mean, what's really satisfying is also along the way, these parents or parents-to-be learn a hell of a lot about nutritional biochemistry and what it takes to be well and stay well. And so now I know that those kids are growing up in a better nutritional environment, and that their brains will develop more healthfully, and they'll be able to solve the kinds of problems that you and I created in the world.
So how do listeners actually come across, like, how do they get in touch with you or your team in terms of finding out about coaching and about, working with you?
Yeah, generally we don't really advertise, but it's mostly word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
And when someone looks the way that they do after we're done with them, they're kind of walking billboards. So it's always through personal referrals. But if people just want to jump on the website, it's simpler, SIMPLR .health. And you can check out a little bit, make your judgments and assessments via our website, and then contact us if it's something that you really want assistance with. Yeah.
Well, I'll be putting all your details in the show notes anyway, so that people can find out about you and what your team and you do. But Dean, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here and chatting. We chatted for double the amount of time that we were supposed to.
You can make 2 episodes out of this.
I think I will, actually. I think I will, because honestly, it's been amazing and I really appreciate your time. So thank you so much. And I can't wait to chat again soon and see you at the next conference, wherever that is.
Yeah, really look forward to it.
Fantastic. Thank you.